In the anime series Chainsaw Man, based on the original manga, a young man named Denji steps into an underworld of hunting devils and supernatural evil with a team of fellow hunters. The first season, produced by Mappa Studios in Japan, is a high-level achievement in action and dramatic animation. In this video, we'll look at how the fourth episode creates cinematic shots to visualize the story. Per usual, there will be spoilers to the story of Chainsaw Man, so I recommend checking out the series before proceeding further. As a general story overview, the first 12 episodes of the series reveal the origin story of Denji and his pet devil Pochita as Denji discovers a new life hunting devils under the mysterious Makima. Denji is assigned to the stoic Aki while being paired with a wild fiend Power. The team falls in and out of various misadventures as more of the truth behind their operation is unveiled. So when looking at how to make cinematic shots, one place to start is analyzing the composition and figuring out the horizon line, as well as what elements are in the foreground, midground, and background. Lens choices can also be part of the equation. In cinematic shot number 1, we see the top half of Denji in a wide shot facing off against another devil. Denji is in the center of the frame, slightly out of focus while the camera focuses on the devil in the midground. The buildings in the background are also slightly blurred, creating a sense of spatial depth. The camera is likely tilted upward, creating a three-point perspective grid. Lighting-wise, the sunlight beaming in between the buildings in the center of the frame backlights the devil, putting Denji mostly in shadow, with a little edge light around him. The camera lens is likely a longer lens, compressing the space in between the foreground, midground, and background. In cinematic shot number 2, the camera is slightly tilted diagonally to create a Dutch angle in a wide shot. The camera appears to be close to the ground and pointed upward, so we see a three-point perspective. There is debris in the foreground on screen left that is slightly out of focus. We see most of Denji's full body in the midground standing in front of the devil, and both are in focus. This shot is taking place in the same scene as the previous shot, and gives us a little more context with the environment. The wider angle gives us more visual information on the space around the characters, prepping us to understand the surroundings as they will soon move dynamically through this space. In cinematic shot number 3, the camera cuts in tighter on Denji, where we see him from approximately waist up as he fights the devil. The camera is pointed upward, showing him in an upshot, and we see the tentacle filling up a lot of the negative space within the frame, showing the scale difference between the creature and Denji. Once again, there is a three-point perspective grid in this shot, and the background is slightly out of focus to create spatial depth. The camera lens might be a slightly longer lens to restrict our view of the surroundings, and to focus on the action around Denji. In cinematic shot number 4, the camera is tracking behind Denji as he races toward the creature in the midground. Denji is slightly out of focus while the creature is in focus. The background is also slightly out of focus to create spatial depth. Denji's foot, which is closer to the camera, appears to be slightly larger in proportion to the rest of his body, so the lens could be a little wider to create this illusion. The creature's tentacle pushes toward the camera, growing in size, giving us perspective cues to show the change in depth. With the shot's composition, we, as the audience, feel like we are barreling toward the creature with Denji. There also is a slight three-point perspective grid, informed by the perspective lines in buildings in the background. In cinematic shot number 5, we see Aki's hand, appearing large in the foreground of the frame. The creature is in the midground, seen through Aki's fingers. The buildings in the background are blurred out of focus, also showcasing a three-point perspective grid. Lighting-wise, there is underlighting on Aki's hand, essentially creating highlights appearing on the underside of his fingers, creating a dramatic tone. The camera lens might be slightly longer to make a tighter frame around Aki's hand. In cinematic shot number 6, we see Aki and Denji from the waist up at the bottom right corner of the frame on screen right. This wider shot places them in the chaotic environment using a longer camera lens that compresses the space between foreground, midground, and background. There is an overturned car in the foreground, slightly blurred out of focus to create spatial depth and allowing our eyes to focus in on Aki and Denji. There appears to be dust clouds in the background that also add to the texture of the scene. In cinematic shot number 7, the camera is outside the building, pointed downward, making a down shot on Aki sitting in a chair waiting on Denji, who is laying in bed. The window frame in the foreground creates a nice framing element to separate Aki and Denji in two different visual spaces, which also highlights the emotional and relational distance between them at this point in the story. The outside light pouring through the window also creates a pattern inside the room, where Aki is mostly in shadow, while Denji is bathed in light. The floor pattern also creates a grid, allowing us to see the ground plane inside the room. In cinematic shot number 8, we see Denji reaching toward the camera for objects that are off screen. His pose is dramatically enhanced by his hand appearing large in proportion to the rest of his body, while the focus of the lens is on his facial expression. The perspective lines of the bed and the wall behind the bed's headboard show spatial depth within the frame. The outside light pouring through the window also put most of Denji's face in shadow, giving a little ominous tone to his expression. The camera lens could be a little wider, allowing for the spatial distortion we see in the environment. In cinematic shot number 9, we see an over-the-shoulder shot for Aki where the camera is focused on Denji in the midground. Denji is nicely framed by the window and curtains in the background, and the outside light is so bright that we don't see details of the outside environment. This creates a backlight effect on Denji where we see most of his face in a profile view and in shadow, with some highlights on the edges. The perspective lines of the electrical outlets on the wall on screen left help us to see depth cues within the frame. In cinematic shot number 10, we see a tighter shot on Makima appearing to look directly into the camera lens. She is in a tighter medium close-up where we see the bottom of the frame around the top of her necktie, and the top of the frame is cutting off the top of her head and hair. The space within the frame is flatter because we don't see as many depth cues or perspective lines, but we see Aki's reflection blurred in the background, along with the outside environment being blurred. The window frame creates different visual spaces for Aki and Makima. The fact that Makima appears larger in the frame than Aki also suggests a difference in status, as Makima is clearly in control of the operation. In cinematic shot number 11, we see a down shot with the camera above Power's head, looking down toward Denji, who is kneeling closer to the ground in the bathroom. The perspective lines formed by the bathroom walls and the items inside the room push spatial depth within the frame, also helped by the fact that Power is slightly out of focus in the foreground. The composition makes Denji look smaller in proportion to Power, setting up the conversation that is going to happen between them. The top lighting within the bathroom flattens Denji's visual appearance inside the space, making him mostly lit with minimal shadows. The camera lens is likely a little wider to accommodate the strong perspective cues inside the frame. So overall, these technical descriptions of each shot helps break down the elements of what makes them cinematic. The language of film as shown in composition, lens choice, and camera movement are well executed in this episode to heighten the drama and action.